Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's an average worker here. I wanted to do a bit of a different video to my usual format today. I wanted to bring you the first in a new series of an exercise tier list. It's a bit of a trend that a lot of YouTube fitness personalities have been doing for a while now, and I sort of wanted to throw my hat in the ring, so to speak. It's going to be a bit of a longer video today, and we're going to be going through some of the shoulder exercises that I think are, best or worst. I'm going to be ranking them from, S to F. And I've picked quite a few here. Some of them you might not have seen before. Some of them you will have. Some of them you'll recognise. Some of them you won't. But I'm gonna get started here anyway. First of all, since this is a bit of a longer video, so I wanted to benchmark things first of all with the overhead press. You can see it here. I'm not putting it in C, but I just wanted to be able to see it separated from the rest of them. So this is sort of one where I'd say I'm a little bit torn because the overhead press, as great of an exercise as it is, and it's been in nearly all of my programs as of late as a main shoulder builder. Um, it's one of those exercises that takes a good bit of skill to get good at. You need to know how to brace properly. You need to know how to really crunch down and then be able to press up while keeping your elbows tight, keeping your elbows locked in, which makes it have a little bit of a learning curve. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a bad exercise whatsoever, and while some people might put it in C or D, I'm going to say it's in A tier, first of all. It's a brilliant exercise. It's been done for so many years, but you do really need to learn how to sort of brace and keep everything locked in to be able to move above your head really well. So, second of all, I'll go to the saying Smith machine sort of is that behind the neck press, I believe. Yeah, I think it's Smith behind the neck press. So this is sort of, I'd say, an alternative compound exercise to the um, overhead press. It's an alternative to that that kind of hits more of the lateral delts. You're coming behind the head and going over with a bit of a wider grip. There's a lot less triceps and a lot more shoulders involved. I would actually say that this is probably better than the overhead press for a lot more people. I think in my own program and in my own lifting journey, I actually started out with the behind the neck press done on the Smith machine, and I think that was the right choice. Really, it helped me build a lot more shoulder mass without having to worry about learning about bracing. Um, and it is a great compound exercise, and it gives you that baseline of shoulder mobility. Um, you know, to be able to do so many more exercises. It doesn't overload the front delts either, so you can still focus on getting a lot of front delt work in there, your front raises or your bench press. Yeah, overall, brilliant exercise, especially when done on the Smith machine. So I'm going to put it in S tier. It's going to be our first S tier exercise. Moving on now, I think the next one to add in is another Smith machine movement that I wouldn't say is as good. It's this one's gonna be the standing overhead press in a Smith machine. I don't think this is a brilliant exercise. When you're doing an overhead press, if you're doing it correctly, movement should start around the chest, right, with you bracing in hard, and then you're gonna press up, keeping the elbows tight, coming out in front of you, and then the elbows are going to externally rotate as you come overhead. And then when you go back down, you're going to come slightly in front of you with the elbows tucked in again. That's how you should be doing an overhead press. I'd say a great place to start when learning the overhead press would be Tom Shepherd has a brilliant tutorial with Elite FTS that you should go and watch if you don't know how to overhead press yet. He can do a lot better job than me. Been doing it for a lot longer. But the Smith machine, because of its straight up and down pattern. It kind of locks you into only one sort of bar path. So your body has to contort around the bar instead of, you know, you being able to move the bar out in front of you and above head. So it can take you out of that brace. Also, most Smith machines in most gyms, you're going to be able to press higher than the Smith machine goes, so you might not even be able to do this exercise. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in D tier, first bad pick. The next pressing movement, I'd say, is the seated military press or AD press, however you want to call it. I think this is sort of, one of those great exercises. As Basement Bodybuilding says, he's working out in a basement, so that's one of the only exercises he does or can do, because he can't do overhead pressing because of the height restriction. So for that reason, this might be one that you have to do instead of overhead press. And it's quite a similar sort of exercise. You have to brace the same. You have to press overhead in the same manner. There's not too much different, except for the fact you're taking the legs out of it. I would actually say this is quite the same as the overhead press in terms of what you're going to get from it. So I'll put it in A tier. Here's one that I'm kind of torn on. This is the high incline bench press. So I would say this is more of a chest exercise than a delt exercise, although you're going to get a lot of front delt work from it. You're training a sort of wider grip again, putting a lot of strain on the front delt and on the pec minor as well. So this is, it's a brilliant exercise. It's a great exercise for the pecs, but you're not hitting nearly any lateral delt in this movement at all. So for that reason, I'm going to leave it in D tier because it's not really a delt exercise. I included it, just because some people like to do high incline presses for delts. Some people get a lot out of it. It just because it's in D tier, it might be one that you need to do because you need a lot more front delts, and maybe you can't do any overhead work because of a rotator cuff injury. That's something else I wanted to mention about the overhead press. If you start out doing this without knowing what you're doing, you can injure your rotator cuff quite easily. So even though it's in A tier, it might not be A tier for you until you're more advanced, until you know the movement. So the next one we've got is the landmine press, the single arm landmine press. So I would say this is a brilliant single arm exercise. It's a really good exercise for athletes. In terms of actual delt work, because of the neutral sort of grip and the fact you're pressing out in front of you, it's really good for rotational power. It's quite a good oblique exercise. It's really good for bracing the core and learning how to drive power from the hips and drive power from the floor. It's a really, really good exercise for that. If you're a boxer or a martial artist, then it's an amazing exercise, and one you should definitely include as one of your primary presses. It's something that I did for many years when I was a boxer. It's sort of the only press we were taught to do. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in B tier. It has a lot of athletic applications, but for pure delt strength and hypertrophy exercise, I wouldn't say it's the best. But because of that, sort of sideways application, I'm going to put it in B tier. So we've got another pressing movement here. This is the sort of AD press done in a Smith machine. It's not sort of like the standing Smith overhead press. You sat down and you can go for that sort of wider grip. I would still prefer the behind the neck Smith press over this, but it is it is a great exercise done on 80 or 90 degree high incline. It's gonna torch your front delts. It's gonna be really good for that. It's gonna be really good for your triceps as well. I think this is, it's one of those exercises that's sort of underrated, I'd say, and has a lot of great applications. It's not going to teach you as much bracing as the overhead press, or the seated AD press, um, but it's still going to be a brilliant exercise for your delts and for that strength, actually. So for that reason, I'll put it in B tier. It's a classic. Marcus Rule did these with four plates, 4 or 5 plates for reps, and he had huge delts. I mean, he was enhanced, but you know still had pretty huge delts even for someone who's enhanced. So that makes it good exercise in my book. But the fact you don't learn the bracing, you don't practice the bracing from it, I'm going to put it in B tier, right? So moving on to sort of dumbbell pressing exercises, we've got the just straight up sideways dumbbell seated overhead press. I'm going to straight away put this in S tier. It's an amazing exercise. It's really sort of easy on your rotator cuff because you can go round your head, you can press overhead in a similar way to the behind the neck press. It's gonna hit the same sort of muscles, but you're also sort of training those stabilizer muscles. This is a brilliant exercise as a complement for bench pressing if you're, a power lifter or a strength athlete. It's going to be absolutely incredible for, just strength in general. If you're a strong man, it's going to be amazing. Hypertrophy, it can be amazing. There's such a range that you can go with this exercise. You're not sort of limited to weight either, because if you're picking a good gym, your dumbbells should go up to 100 kilos, maybe 200 pounds. So unless by the time you're pressing 100 kilo dumbbells overhead, you're gonna have some pretty huge shoulders. You're gonna have won by then. So you probably, if you're at that point, you're gonna be able to overhead press a lot with a barbell. Um, Probably progress a lot more with that movement. Um, but I'm gonna put it straight in S tier. It's probably even better than the behind neck press because behind the neck press, one of the limitations with it is that you're gonna have to sort of set up the Smith machine bench every time in the right place, which makes it a little bit harder. Doesn't make the movement any worse. It's harder to set up though. Dumbbells, you just kick the dumbbells up and you start pressing. It's easy as, and you can do it in every single gym that you're in. The next one is going to be the Arnold press, the rotating dumbbell overhead press. I don't like this exercise. I think it's I think it's more front delt biased than the side on sort of overhand dumbbell overhead press. Um, it's a press. That's about it. It's gonna activate more triceps. The rotation factor is a bit of a gimmick, I'd say. There's a debate on whether Arnold was just doing it to sort of, throw his competitors off the trail. Who knows? I mean, it's an exercise. I'm gonna put it in C tier. You can progress with it for a long period of time. For that reason, it's quite good. But other than that, I wouldn't choose this over a dumbbell seated press. Next, we're gonna go with a neutral grip dumbbell overhead press. This is the same as the Arnold press for me. I haven't ever got any sort of benefit from it. I've never done it massively in my programs because for that reason I've always gone with the regular dumbbell press. I don't think this is any better than the Arnold press or any worse, so I'll put it in C tier all the same. Okay, what have we got next? All right, we'll go with the circus. I'm calling it a circus dumbbell press. One arm sort of bent press. I couldn't find a great picture to show this as a sort of example. You're going to clean the dumbbell up and you're going to press it overhead, sort of a bent press style, not straight up in front of you. I think this is an amazing exercise. I don't see nearly anyone doing this. I really don't see anyone doing single arm standing dumbbell overhead press. I think, you know, the circus dumbbell press was done for hundreds of years as a primary pressing exercise by people like George Hackenschmidt, by people like Doug Hepburn. It's one of those sort of forgotten exercises. You can watch me go and do it in the George Hackenschmidt Forgotten Bodybuilding video that I put up a few months ago. But this is one of those, I'd say, just give it a go, just try it out, and you'll realize, the level of bracing you have to do, the level of oblique strength that it develops as well. And serratus strength is, unparalleled by any other exercise, I'd say. I don't usually like single arm pressing movements, but this is one I just think it's a brilliant exercise. I'm going to put it in S tier straight away. The fact it's a unilateral movement as well. It's one of the first unilateral movements we're talking about. You can focus everything on just pressing on that one side. You can absolutely torch your delts. You can torch your triceps. Just a great exercise, I'd say. The next one we're going to go for is this is a difficult one. It is a seated sort of machine press. This is going to solely depend on what kind of machine you've got. Some of the best ones I've ever used were, the Prime seated press. That's a great exercise. You can sort of bias the stretch position, or you can bias the lockout. Wherever you usually get stuck on an overhead press, you can train. And I think that's, absolutely brilliant with that machine. Another one is the Hammer Strength pin loaded or the Hammer Strength plate loaded machines. They're amazing. Hammer Strength make the best shoulder machines, I'd say. They're quite cheap. They're durable. You can load them to a ridiculous degree. Any of you saying that you're gonna, outgrow a Hammer Strength shoulder press machine, you're not. Eddie Hall is, touted as probably the best presser of all time, from sort of my area as well. We like Eddie. He's one of the best pressers of all time. He couldn't even max out the Hammer Strength shoulder press at Strength Asylum, and that's you're just not gonna be able to, and when you can, you're gonna have massive delts anyway. You can't max it out more than you would a dumbbell or a barbell. So I'm going to put that in S tier. But actually going to knock it down to A tier, because for every Hammer Strength or Prime shoulder press, there is a pretty awful alternative version, which is pin loaded, that you can rep out the stack for 20 reps. Even I can, and I'm a natural 85-ish kilo lifter. I'm pretty strong, but if I'm able to rep out a pin loaded machine, easily, it's not heavy enough at all. So for that reason, I'm going to put it into A tier. If you've got a great one, it's an S tier exercise. But if not, A tier. So move on to sort of more of the. Oh no, I've got one more press. This is a stupid one. A 2-arm landmine press, where you're grabbing sort of the middle of the barbell and then pressing overhead like that. I didn't even want to include this because it's not an exercise that anyone who trains properly is going to be doing, really. But I've included it anyway because I understand there'll be a lot of novices that are seeing sort of Instagram posts of people trying to come up with new exercises that aren't really functional at all, trying to do them. A few reasons why this is awful. Firstly, you're going to be pressing so far out in front of you with such a close grip that you're just going to be activating a lot of triceps. Secondly, the fact it's one arm is going to allow you to lean into it too much. You're going to be using way too much sort of leg drive, leg movement, and too much of your own body weight to be able to assist, make you able to do way more than you could. But even though you're able to do way more than you can, you'll be able to max it out to the point where you get 3 or 4 plates on the end of the barbell. You can't even grab the end of the barbell anymore, and you can't do the exercise. So unless you've got an elephant bar, you won't be able to do anything. And by that point, when you've got an elephant bar, the lever's longer. It feels even lighter. There's no point. There's no point to doing this exercise. It's one of those CrossFit mum exercises that they do to feel like they're training when they're not really. It's going in F tier straight away. First F tier exercise, done and dusted. It's not a very good one. Now I think we are on to the sort of isolation exercises. No more compounds. I'm going to start us off with a baseline of, I'm going to say, the standing, call it a standing lateral raise done with, not so strict form, a little bit of forward lean, a little bit of body English. I think it's a great exercise. I think it's really good for isolating the delts. There are some drawbacks though. The amount that you can let the cheat get away from you is going to limit your progression. Your progression's going to go up, but whether it's progression from your actual delts or whether it's progression from the amount you're leaning and the amount of hip drive you can use, you're not going to be able to control that very easily unless you're extremely strict with your form. Unless you're a form demon, then you're not going to be able to. And if you are, a form demon like that, you might as well be doing a strict version and staying small. So you want to kind of be able to control the form and be able to cheat to use the most weight possible and focus it on the delts. The other issue with it is that if you're like me and you've had injuries to your legs or ankles and you've got sort of one leg shorter than the other slightly, that can knock you off to a massive degree. You can end up with one shoulder that's way bigger than the other, which I had because I did these for years. And, you don't think about those sort of things, those sort of imbalances, but they do matter. They can be done really well. They are one of those that's a really good exercise. They're a basic movement, but for that reason, I'm gonna put them in B tier. Nothing wrong with them, but they have their drawbacks. Now, an alternative to this, which is a lot better, I'm going to put straight in S tier because it's one of my favourite delt exercises. Probably my favourite delt exercise of all time is a sort of seated lateral raise done with cheating form. So you'll be able to find videos of me doing this, shorts of me doing this on the channel. It's where you've got the dumbbells in hand, you lean forward with them underneath the bench and cheat them up. This is an absolutely amazing exercise because you're standardizing the level of cheat that you're allowed. You can only cheat as far as your body can lean forward when you sat down. Whereas if I'm stood up, you can see I can lean a lot more forward. Right? The amount of power you're going to get from the cheat as well is limited to your torso length. For that reason, you can safely say that the power is coming from your shoulders and a limited amount from your torso. You can't increase it more using your hips. It takes the hips sort of out of it, just uses the lumbar spine. Amazing exercise. You know, once you get heavy with it, once you get sort of over 20 kilos per dumbbell, which is where I'm sort of at, around 22 to 25 kilos per dumbbell now, your shoulders are going to be sore like you wouldn't believe. You can progress as far as your dumbbell whack goes. You're not going to. I think the most I've seen someone do is 30 kilos for reps, which is absolutely unbelievable. But they were huge, and you're not going to get above 30, 40 kilos really. You can if you're a freak, but it's such a good exercise. You're not limited in any way with this one. You can progress it sort of forever. Where's the next one that I'm going to go for? The next one is the same exercise, but done with strict form. So you're seated, you sat straight up, and you're doing a strict lateral raise. You could say there's more delt activation. You could say that it's focused more on the delts. But I would argue that you're limited in the range of motion. It's hard to say. You're limited in the range of motion once you get past a certain point of weight, at which point you can't progress anymore. The reason why is once you get past, sort of 15, 17 kilos, when you're, in comparison to if you were able to do 25 with cheating form, when you get to sort of like 15 kilo mark and you do it completely strict, it's really hard to reach sort of the top position, to lock out the top position without having way more body weight mass, just because you're sort of limited by the amount of weight that anchors you there. It's such a hard feeling to describe, but even if your shoulders can push more, once they get to that point where the lever arm is so long and far away from your body, no matter how strong you get, you can't push past sort of there, which means you're missing out a good chunk of range of motion where there's a lot of delt activation. And once you get to the point where you are strong enough to go past it, your lower delts, or the part of the range of motion, if you believe in sort of localized growth along a muscle fiber, which I do, that part you're going to be so ridiculously strong that it's out of proportion to the top part. So if you can smooth that resistance curve by cheating, then you're going to be growing your delts at an even rate. You're going to be activating the fibers at an even rate. Whereas when you're doing strict form, you're going to get to the point where you just end up doing length and partials. If you keep progressing the weight, because you get to a point where you just can't anymore. Or you're just going to stay small and stay with the same weight, which, people like Jeff Nippard and the Science Based crew love to preach about. So even though it's an easy, great exercise, for beginners to teach good form, I'm going to put it in B tier, maybe even C, but I'll leave it for B tier because it's still dumbbell exercise. It's just not that great. If you move on to cheating form, you'll progress so much better. Trust me. So the next one I'm going to talk about is a sort of strict form kettlebell version of standing lateral raise. So this is even worse than the standing strict version. This is worse than the seated strict version for that resistance curve at the top. The same reasons why strict version is bad seated. The kettlebell version is even heavier at the top. which it just becomes unbearable. I think this is good if you've got nothing else, if you've not got dumbbells, but if you have an alternative, you know, I'm gonna put it in detail. It's not great. It's not a great exercise. So the next sort of lateral raise movement with free weights I'm going to talk about is the single arm dumbbell lateral, so done with either strict or cheating form. I think this is a good exercise. I think it limits your core. You have to work on your core stability quite a lot. That can be a really good thing. That could be a really good idea. But, you know, that core stability is going to mean you can't get past maybe a quarter of your body weight, because when you're trying to do things with that 25 kilo dumbbell that you could use with cheating form with the other one, because you've not got the counterbalance on the other side, you'll get to a point where it is just pulling you over, which gets a bit difficult. It's great if you've only got one dumbbell. If you've only got one dumbbell, do these, but two dumbbells is always going to be better. You'll save more time as well. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Not bad, not great. Can be really good if you're an athlete, or if you're a strength athlete or strongman or boxer or anything where you're trying to work on core stability. That can be a perk then, but you're not going to get past a certain weight unless your body weight shoots up as well. So I'm going to say the next one is the Lou raise. I'm going to piss off a lot of other natural influencers and sort of speakers in our space. A lot of them like to suck Lou's arse and talk about how this is a brilliant exercise and how, you know, it's a great way to do lateral raises or sort of around the world. Firstly, I don't think that the lateral raise done above sort of parallel is a great way to activate the delts. I think once you get past a certain point, it's just all rotator cuff, and it's going to limit the amount of weight that you can do. The Lou raise as well, you sort of open up as well, so it shifts where in the delt you feel the exercise. That's a benefit, you know, for warming up, for what Lou does it for, which is for weightlifting. When you're throwing overhead with a snatch, it mimics a snatch. So for weightlifting, it's a good exercise. I want to talk about doing it with the plates, right? He's doing it with the plates. Sorry to tell you this, not for any special reason with plates, but because when you're warming up for Olympic weightlifting, the only thing they have around is plates. They don't keep dumbbells lying around in the warm-up rooms at the Olympics. They don't have any. So they're just going to be using sort of calibrated plates, and the only thing he can use is 10 kilos, because if you're getting strong enough to do it with 20 kilos, you know, it's just going to be one of those where it's a bit too heavy to go fully overhead. Maybe I'm wrong, but that jump as well from 10 to 15 to 20 kilos, that's not that's too big of a jump to progress viably. You might as well use dumbbells, where they're at least 2.5 kilo jumps. Yeah, I think he's just doing it because they didn't have dumbbells. I think that's genuinely why he was doing it with plates. The other thing is, once you get past 25 kilos, there isn't any bigger plates unless you're using two plates, which is kind of impossible unless you've got hands like Mark Henry, or, you know, you're using 100-pound plates like Ronnie Coleman used to use, which at that point you're doing 50-kilo plate raises, which doesn't seem like anyone would be able to do that to me. I think it's just a subbed in sort of dumbbell raise, I'm gonna put it in F tier. I don't think there's any reason you should do this over dumbbells. And I think, you know, Lou would agree. Probably. That same reason we have the plate front raise. This is one of those where I see people doing it and thinking it's better than dumbbell front raises. I don't think it is. I think it's just, if you've got a plate available, brilliant. I think that's what people are sort of using it for. It's no worse than a barbell front raise. I'm gonna put it in D tier, maybe because F tier, because you're limited to the weight again. You're limited once you get strong enough and you're doing it with 25 kilo plates. That's an easy number to get to, doing front raises with 25 kilos. You can do that within your first year of training easily. You've got nowhere to go. So, yeah, trash exercise. Sorry. Sorry for anyone who does those. So, I'm going to go with the dumbbell front raise, done either seated or standing. So I like to do it with an overhand turned in pronated grip. I think this is an absolutely amazing exercise, and I don't think enough people do the sort of dumbbell front raises. I don't think enough people do front raises. I'm going to put it in S tier. I don't think enough people do them because of, fear mongering and talking down from certain individuals like Dr. Mike, who has lost all credibility recently for good reason. Saying, oh, you don't need to do these. You get enough front delt work from bench presses or your overhead presses or whatever, right? Firstly, if you're following a program written by anyone like that, they don't have you doing bench presses. They don't have you doing overhead presses. They have you doing some kind of machine. They might have you just doing flies for your chest. They might have you just doing lateral raises or machine shoulder presses for your delts. You might end up in one of those positions where you don't have any front delt work, and then you end up not being front delt dominant. They might say things and buzzwords and phrases like everybody's front delt dominant. They're not. Not everybody is. I was side delt dominant for a long time because, as I said, I started with the Smith behind the neck presses. I got so good at those and so mobile that I was using a huge amount of side delt, way more than front delts. I also only did incline presses instead of bench presses and Smith. I did Smith incline presses. I didn't do barbell bench because the gym I worked out at was an apartment gym. They only had a Smith machine, which I absolutely maxed out. But I used what I could. I made great gains, but I ended up with front delts that were massively weaker than my side delts. So what did I do to rectify this? I did front raises with dumbbells, and my front delts grew massively and looked a lot better. So I think if you need front delt work, doing front raises is probably the best thing you can do. And I don't think you'd be remiss to just add them into your program to give it a go. I think they're absolutely brilliant. You've got as well the cable front raise here. I've seen, Chris Bumstead sort of made this a bit of a popular exercise. I think it's a good exercise. Depending on your leg morphology, you might, nearly cut your groin off with the cable, and I certainly do. If I pull the cable between my legs, try and do front raises that way, sort of limits me there. You're limited to the cable stack. A lot of cable stacks are very, very light, and you can max out cable stacks doing various different things. A lot of gyms, a lot of basic pure gyms and things like that. I think it's no better than a front raise. Certainly worse than a dumbbell front raise. It's sort of like a barbell front raise, or it's better than the plate front raise, but I'm going to put it in B tier. The force curve, the resistance curve is quite nice. but you know, it doesn't work for everybody. The next one that I'm going to move on to, I'd say, is the sort of cable lateral raises, done with both cable stacks at once. If you're being a bit of a prick and taking up the fly station, both cable stations, doing these or cable crossovers, you're not going to be well liked in the gym, but you might have pretty good delts. I think this is a good exercise if you can set it up correctly. If you can get right in the middle and cross them over perfectly, you know, brilliant, good for you. For me, when I do it, I tend to end up a bit too in front of me, and I feel it a lot more in the sort of front than I do in the side. It can get a bit difficult to set up. You're also limited by the weight stack. It's one of those. It's just one of those where when you get it right, it's good. Other than that, not amazing. There are better alternatives. I'll put it in C tier. One of those better alternatives I'm going to talk about is the sort of side-on leaning cable station single arm lateral raise. This is one of the ones from the science-based lifters that I actually do like. It's pushed by them a lot. It's not them who sort of made it really popular originally. Dorian Yates used to do these. He was massive. He also trained very hard. If you train really hard with these, right, and actually try and progress and use a bit of body English, it's a great exercise. It's one I've done for many, many years in the most, sort of weak science-based fashion possible with a cuff, right? But you can get stupidly strong on these, and it's very, very good for your shoulders. It's one of those that I did when I injured my rotator cuff doing overhead presses, and used it to sort of rehab my shoulder. It's a great exercise. It is really actually quite good because it's single arm. You're not going to max out a weight stack on this. You have loads of room to progress. The only issue is, as I said, sort of grabbing a handle and going all the way up. If you've got a weaker grip, it might be a limiting factor. Getting a stronger grip would be the best thing to do in that situation, but it can sort of play on your wrist a little bit when you sort of pull into that position. And I think if you've got a cuff, this is one of the few applications I'd say. If you use a cuff, this will put that exercise into sort of A or S tier. I'm going to put it in A tier for now. I think you can get more out of dumbbells, but still a really, really good exercise. So the next one is going to be the machine lateral raise. So you might think from what I said about the cable sort of version, this might be better. It depends. Now, if you've got one of these where it's quite good, a freestanding one, like the Atlantis or Panata ones where you grab the two handles, can be quite good, but you're even more limited on your grip on these. It's one of those where you can max the stack out quite easily, but your grip's just gonna be feeling weird. It puts you in a weird position, and if it doesn't fit your body right, it's gonna feel really bad. A lot of the seated ones as well. I've noticed something. If they're not well maintained or well built, some of these can have a little bit of delay on one side. So I've used quite a few of these lateral raise machines over the years, and I've noticed this in a lot of them. So what happens if you know machines at all is you have one stack in the machine, and if it's a dual arm exercise, both those pulleys pull on the same stack, but there's two different pulleys. And sometimes those pulleys can get longer or shorter over time when the weight pulls on them. So what happens if they're not tensioned right, and there's a difference in distance on the cable to each stack, is when you start, one side takes all the weight, and then the other shoulder doesn't kick in until like there. So you're getting way more work on sort of one side. This happens. I'm at one of the best gyms in the country, and still, the lateral raise machine, when you use it, it only kicks in on one side for the start of the movement, which severely limits you, and it can be a bit janky when the other shoulder does sort of get in. It's super light. There's no resistance on it until about there. So for that reason, I'm gonna put these in detail. If you have a good machine, might be good, but I'm yet to find one. Alternatively, for your rear delts, I think the reverse pec deck is probably the single best exercise that you can do for your rear delts. If you have a prime pec fly, then it's even better. It is ridiculous. You can change the force curve to where it's hardest at the top or hardest at the bottom. I like to do for my rear delts. My routine is 4 sets with 2 of those sets where it's really, really hard at the start of the movement and gets easier at the end, and 2 sets where it's really hard at the lockout. That does everything you need. If you have a prime pec fly, just do that for your rear delts and thank me later. I think it's probably the best single machine exercise you can do for the rear delts. Absolutely amazing. Coming sort of behind that is another cable sort of variant, the leaning over single arm rear delt fly, sort of if you can see, sort of like that. Got one hand on one knee, and you ripcord the machine sort of. Before I had access to a reverse pec deck, that's what I did, and it was amazing. Really, really good exercise. I'd say 80, definitely. Only because the pec deck's still better. But it's just going to build tremendous horsepower. Absolutely tremendous. It's really going to make your rear delt strong. You can push a lot into it. It's like getting extremely strong at starting up a chainsaw. So if you're in a dad contest of who can start up a lawnmower fastest, you're going to win every time if you do this exercise. I think it's brilliant. Another cable rear delt exercise is the face pull. So I'm going to put this one straight in beta. I think it's a good rear delt exercise. I think it's better for your traps. I think it's one of those that's really good for teaching you how to sort of stabilize using the traps and rear delts. Good deadlift accessory, good bench press accessory to teach you scapular retraction. Really good for your shoulder health, especially if you sort of add that rotator cuff pull at the end. It's great for your rotator cuff. It's really good rehabbing movement. There's nothing I can say about this which is exemplary or really bad. The only thing that's limiting it is that you might get strong enough to where you can just pull yourself forward. I'm like that, so it can feel a bit janky there, but it's sort of just a rehab movement anyway, so I'll put it in B tier. The next sort of one I'm going to go for is the seal reverse fly. So you're lying on a bench, you're doing reverse flies. This was a favourite of Jay Cutler. I think this is a really good rear delt exercise, but for me, I find it a bit uncomfortable. It's good in theory on your rear delts, but I don't like being in that sort of seal row position. I don't like the feeling that my balls are getting crushed into the seat. I know that's weird, but when anything like that sort of takes you out of an exercise, you can't focus fully. And for that reason, for me, I'm going to put it in C tier. I wouldn't really do this. I wouldn't do it if I had another option. I'd rather do this exercise, which is the leaning, bent over dumbbell fly. I think that's much better version. You're working a hinge pattern as well. You're working stabilizing bent over. It's good for deadlifts. It's good for being a bench accessory. I think it's just a good exercise. You can overload it quite well. You can cheat with it. I'm going to put that in A tier actually. We're getting through the list. We're getting there. How far through are we? I'm not sure. Oh God, we're nearly an hour through. Right, okay. This is going to be a long video. I'm sorry. Next one, getting onto the upright rows. So the regular upright row. Hang on, I don't know where that's gone. I think I've just deleted the upright row. Oh well. Upright rows. Just imagine I put the upright row in. I want to say C tier. Oh, here it is. C tier. I want to say C tier for upright rows. They're, in theory, a really good delt exercise. In theory, they hit the exact same sort of plane of movement and exact same portion of the delt as the lateral raise. I'm going to say why I think that's wrong. There's certain people like Lyle McDonald who've been pushing the upright row recently. Stefan Kienzl as well. You know, they're people I respect. I think are really, really good exercise scientists and really good coaches. I think it's a good exercise in theory, but when you get heavy enough with them, the amount of flexion on the wrist, the amount of force exerted on the wrist, kind of makes this a difficult exercise to progress really far with. And when you get to the point where it's exerting a lot of force on the wrist, you can tend to rotate forward too much, which I don't know whether this is true biomechanically, but for me, I feel it a lot more in the traps there. And trying to keep that force there is just a lot of shearing force on the wrists. You can get really good at feeling the delt with it. I think it's a bit of a skill that you have to learn. So it's sort of like the overhead press in that regard. But I mean, it's a good exercise if you've only got a barbell and you're at a home gym and you don't want to buy dumbbells. Then it's a great it's actually a great lateral delt exercise. I guess I'll put it in B tier then, but I don't think it's the best sort of upright row movement you can do. I think even worse than this is the dumbbell upright row. So if I'm putting that in B tier, I'm going to put the dumbbell row with the dumbbell upright row in C tier. I don't think it's very good exercise. I think it can be worse. It can be better because there's less of that wrist flexion, but it's going to be really hard to move your arms up at the same sort of speed, at the same in the same way. It just for me feels a bit janky. It doesn't feel right for me. Might be great for other people. I don't know, but I'd even rather do the barbell version for this. It keeps your shoulders moving at the same sort of speed and same rotation level. Because if you're out in rotation even slightly, it really doesn't feel good, and you can pop something. Even worse than this is the kettlebell version. I've seen people do kettlebell upright rows. The grip's too close. You know, there's nothing wrong with the kettlebell, the weight. It's just that the grip is way too close, and you're not gonna get much delt there. It's going to turn a lot more into a shrug. So I'm going to put that in F tier. I'm going to put the cable version of the upright row in A tier. I think it smooths the resistance curve, and instead of being pulled straight down by gravity with the barbell, when you're trying to pull upwards, it pulls you directly down. If you step out with the cable slightly and you pull up, it's pulling sort of laterally as well as vertically. So the force on your wrists isn't as bad downwards. It kind of aligns more with your bones. So this is one of those instances I'd say the cable version's superior. Even better, I couldn't get a picture for this one, but if you've followed my channel for a while, you'll have seen this exercise before. It's one of my sort of secret ones. If you lie on a dual pulley row, if you lie flat back on a dual pulley row, put your knees on the foot pads and get cuffs on or handles and pull straight up, do an upright row leaning back on a pulley row, that's an S tier exercise, instantly S tier. It's absolutely amazing. It's an amazing exercise. I think it's probably one of the best side delt exercises you can do. That's, you know, I originally started doing that because I saw Marcus Rule doing it with a bar on a low pulley row. I thought that's just absolutely genius. I tried it with a bar, and then I tried it because we've got a dual pulley stack at my gym. I tried it with 2 handles. It felt amazing. Felt really good, but I had that wrist issue again, so I put cuffs on and did sort of an upright row lying back. Oh my god, just the best sort of side delt activation I've ever felt. You can't max it out because it's made for rowing, the stack, so you're never going to be able to upright row as much as you can like low pulley row. I think it's just excellent exercise. So imagine that's there, and imagine it's an S tier. I couldn't get a picture of that because I don't think many people have done it. Next, a little funny one. A couple funny ones to end with. The side shrug. This is sort of a movement I've seen people do when they've never held a dumbbell before in their life, and you tell them to go on, have a go with the dumbbells. I don't know why, but instinctively the first thing people do is this kind of monkey shrug with the dumbbells. You're not. I don't know what muscles you're working, but it's not the right ones. Maybe biceps, maybe some traps and rear delts, but you're not gonna be able to do that for long. It's not a very good exercise whatsoever for the shoulders, I'd say. In a similar vein, the dumbbell over underhand hammer grip front raise, two hands on one dumbbell. I mean, it's front raise. I mean, your hands are going to be at different heights when you're doing it, or clasped. It doesn't feel good at all, and I wouldn't do it. Just use a lighter dumbbell and do it one-handed. You know, it's a great. The front raise is a great exercise, but that's a bad version. So I think that's it for the tier list. Take the complete tier list. You know, watch the video, and you know, see what you think of some of these exercises. All these S tier exercises that we've got. You know, front raises, the cheating sort of side delt presses. You know. Side delt laterals, circus dumbbell press, dumbbell presses, behind the neck press, reverse pec fly. They're all amazing exercises. One I'd like to add as well that I didn't get a picture for. It's just popped into my head now. A machine, if you have it, is a Viking press. If you have a Viking press, which I've not even included it, I don't think most gyms. My gym doesn't have it. The only gym I can think of that's close to me is Strength Asylum that has a Viking press. If you've got a Viking press, that's an S tier delt exercise. It's absolutely amazing. That's just a final one. But got the list of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to this. I don't like doing sort of dogmatic tier lists where you should be doing this, shouldn't be doing this. You should try all of these. Don't other than maybe front raise with a dumbbell and the shrug thing. Um, I don't think there's any of these where you couldn't do them and get something out of them. Overall, the thing that matters the most is your intensity. What you're willing to put into the exercise is what you get out of it. And in the end, that's what really matters with it. I hope you've enjoyed this tier list anyway. It's the first of a new series. I'm gonna try and get a few more of these out quite soon. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned something from it, and hope you found it entertaining. Probably not. It's an hour-long video of me talking about exercises, but if you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a comment, tell me what you want, what body part you want me to do next. Tell me whether you disagreed or agreed with the different exercises. But either way, enjoy, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much. See you next time. That's an average worker tuning out.